people tune into news to know, is my world safe?
That's it.
And in that moment, that may have been the first time in my lifetime when there was a question, is my world safe?
Hey, everybody, I'm so excited. When I get to do in-studio interviews, and more importantly, when I get an opportunity to meet people who live in the world in which I do, thrive in this space called media, it's a wonder to meet you and how you do it all. So, Linsey Davis, thank you so much for being naked, or being on naked, rather.
Well, that was the thing. I didn't know the appropriate attire. I was thinking like, oh, okay, we're getting down like that. Okay, but no, I'm so thrilled to be with you.
We have so many mutual people that we work with and know.
Right.
And so I have been able to watch your work and just think what grace, what class, what dignity.
Oh, thank you.
And it's really it's an honor for me to have this conversation with you, because I always think to myself, there's something in us, I think, when we're young that decides what we want to be in life, whether we realize it or not.
Right.
And I'm curious, did you always know this would be the destination in terms of I want to be a broadcast journalist? I want to be a reporter covering.
I did not know that. Now, my family would tell you, and I do vividly remember gathering in my maternal grandmother's house or grandparents' house. And I would gather my family around, aunts, uncles, cousins, parents, sister, and I would entertain them. Mm-hmm. So I would say like, ha, 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 excuse me, just a joke. Like I would just do these little riffs. Mm-hmm. And I would dance like Michael Jackson. I was like a performer for people. But I didn't know it was going to be news until I was maybe 21, and did just kind of have this aha moment where I had had a Spanish exchange student in high school. I was going to visit her while I was studying abroad, my third year of college. And it was the first time that I was able to just take whatever classes I wanted. I didn't have the core curriculum that I had to fulfill in order to graduate. And I was sitting in her apartment by myself watching the Las Noticias, and I should have understood, but really in the moment, it was kind of like Charlie Brown's mom, like, wah, 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 wah. And I just said, I want to do that. And I never looked back. Once I got back to the United States, I started just seeing, because I hadn't done any internships at that point. And at that time, and you might remember, in order to get an internship, you had to do it in exchange for college credit. It's
Correct.
No longer like that.
Correct.
Fortunately for the students of today. But so then I went to NYU and got a graduate degree, a master's degree, just to get an internship.
Oh, wow.
Because I had kind of decided so late that this is what I wanted to do. But there was just that epiphany, that revelation where I decided I want to do this.
When you say you decided so late, did it feel late to you because you were still a senior in college, or just, you just graduated? Does that feel late to you
I
now?
have been, and there must be some like label or diagnosis for me, Cari, I'm sure, because I am very milestone, benchmark, next step, next move. What are we doing?
Interesting.
And so I did feel, I would say, when I was in my first year of college, and I can't remember, I think it was the first year, second semester, I went to University of Virginia, and I believe you had to declare your major at that point.
Yeah.
And I did have a little anxiety of like, I don't know what I want to be. Mm-hmm. And so it seemed like many of my other classmates at the time knew. Mm-hmm. Like they were very clear, like, oh yeah, I'm going to be an engineer, I'm going to be a nurse. And so I really wasn't sure. And so I actually was a psychology major, and I did graduate with a psychology major, which I think totally is appropriate for what we do.
100%.
And I thought I wanted to be a psychologist.
Ooh.
I think that I talk to people about their life stories.
Yeah.
Every day. That's still what I do, right?
You do it in a way. Mm-hmm.
Now, the funny thing is, 2 different weddings, people approached me. One of them, because in both scenarios, I gave the toast.
Okay.
One of them was my very good friend throughout middle school and high school. Unbeknownst to me, somebody approaches me. He was like, I own a bunch of news stations in Maryland. I think you'd be a great journalist. You have a great voice. You're a great storyteller. Wow. And at the time, I was like, oh, yeah, okay. But it's funny how that came back, right? And at my sister's wedding, I had given a toast as well. And it wasn't anyone in the industry, but it was like people who were saying, you've got to do something with your voice. You've got to be in front of the public. And again, and that was maybe, 3 or 4 years apart. And I just didn't really think about it, but it always would come back to me when I really ended up sitting in front of a camera or with a microphone on.
Yeah, it's interesting how life gives you the direction, and sometimes either you feel it, you see it, and then you're like, oh, it all makes sense now. This was
Yes.
all what I was supposed to do. I think that a path that isn't so laid out always leads us to where we're supposed to be. And when you first got into this business and you had the ability to tell stories and then maybe even be a therapist, right? As you, because that is essentially what happens so many times. When was the moment in your career? Was it early on, or did it take a while for you're like, I'm meant to do this? There's always just this moment. For me, I was my very first job, I was a one-man band. I was working in West Virginia. And I was like, oh, I'm meant to do this because I still love this.
Yes.
Like, I'm sweating. I don't even know what's going on, but I'm getting to the point and I can tell stories. And I love to tell stories.
There have been different moments in my life where I felt like, wow, this fits me perfectly. But I would say then I'll go through different phases where, and it's kind of where I was when I started writing back in 2018 when I published my first children's book, where I had felt like maybe I've hit a ceiling, maybe this is all there is. There was a point where it did just get routine. And like I wasn't telling meaningful stories that mattered, like the big J stuff that I really got into this for. It was more just like, okay, got to do this for Good Morning America, got to do this for World News, got to do this for Nightline. You're just churning with very just quick turnaround and not a lot of change that you feel like you're impacting on the world. And I just happened to be having this conversation with a colleague of mine a week ago because we did a piece on the LA County Juvenile Detention Center, and I went to LA for 2 weeks, really, different months, different time periods, and sat and interviewed these now women who were girls decades ago in the Juvenile Detention Center for doing things like, skipping school, and then they ended up being molested, abused, raped. And turns out there are nearly 3,000 complainants in this class action suit.
Wow.
And it's still happening today. One of the days that we went to interview the head of the detention facility, they canceled, but because there was an arrest that day of a probation officer who had been having sex with one of the kids. And so those are the stories, and then that actually fill me, that I find so fulfilling.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because a lot of times people will think it's the like celebrities and the flash, of like the red carpet. And for me, everything is satisfying in a different way. And so that's why, to answer your original question, I feel it at different points where I remember why I got into it, but it's not always for the glitz and glam that people think that it is.
I don't even think, can I be honest with you? I think we oftentimes have great assignments and we get to travel to great places and we get to experience history in real time. But the glamour of it, I miss. Because the churn and the burn and the extended hours, no one can really relate to it if you haven't done it, because they're like, you're on the T and the V, and you're like, but it's still a grind.
I remember I was working in Indianapolis at the time, but we went to cover Hurricane Katrina. No hotels, no electricity, no food. I was just me and my photographer. We got to know each other very well.
Yeah, hello.
It was like
they become your best friends.
Car. Yeah. We slept in the car for multiple days, eating granola and ramen noodles, and people, I think, they don't see that often.
No.
And so they see a different. And so whenever I'm often a mentor for young aspiring journalists, and I'm like, if you're just doing this just because you want to see yourself on TV,
not gonna work.
This is not for you.
Yeah, you're not going to last.
It's really not for you.
No matter how glamorous you think I look, this is not going to be what it is. today's media, I have this conversation a lot. In the world of sports, there are so many people, and even also in just journalism in general, but there are so many people who have these platforms who can create their own brand of television if they will, whether it be the Pivot podcast or the I Am Athlete. I'm thinking of all the smoke in my world for sports. There are all of these athletes who've now decided, instead of going to work for the traditional network, I'm going to take my money, my resources, and invest in my own channel because digital is it.
We are seeing that so often.
So new media is interesting to me because that's what they're calling it. Do you see the same in your space?
Oh, yes.
And what does that look like to you as a quote unquote traditional journalist who grew up differently?
Well, I'm reminded of like Murrow when, he was this big radio guy, right? And when radio was first kind of not switching over to TV, but TV was becoming the new medium at that time, the new media. And Murrow famously was reluctant, hesitant to leave radio.
Yeah.
Like, what? TV, And there was this kind of fear of the change, of the unknown. And I really relate to that time then, now.
Yeah.
As we're talking about streaming versus traditional TV or cable news. And one thing about it, I love because it's like, I anchor World News Tonight on Sunday, which is a 30-minute newscast, but by the time you have commercials, it's really like 22 minutes.
Correct.
And this is world news. Mm-hmm. So how are you supposed to fit all of that into 22 minutes? Mm-hmm. All the things that you need to know with the nuance and the context and give it the appropriate analysis, space and time. And those are the things that you have that luxury with streaming. We can have a piece
all day.
It doesn't matter. And so you can really take that deep dive. You can go down those rabbit holes. You can give people a greater understanding, and really just get in depth. And so I really like that. And so I think that there's something for everybody, right? The people who just want the quick, just want the 22 minutes, or if you really want an hour and a half worth of news. And the nice thing about where I am right now is I'm kind of straddling a bunch of different boxes. So I do a radio 2-minute broadcast at 5 o'clock every day. And then I do World News on Sundays. And then I do ABC News Live Prime during the week in streaming space. And so I really am, I think, trying to tick off all the boxes. So like, if you want this kind of news, we got this kind of. If you want this, if you want that, we've got it. And that is exciting to be really bridging the present, because it's not the past at this point, but the present with the future, maybe we'll call it.
Yeah.
Because I do think that we are really on this precipice of how people are, clearly you just don't have families gathering in front of the TV set for their evening broadcast anymore, right?
To do that.
Yes.
It's impossible to do that in today's age. What you were saying to me is that you have a diverse portfolio when it comes to your work, because I think that's what we all have. We all have our, whether it's a podcast, a radio show, streaming, and then TV.
Yes.
TV to me has now become, and okay, I'll do that too. Because that's just what it is.
Yes.
You're streaming for ABC News Live, right? And so then you have the Sunday show, and then you say you have radio. That's just what it is. So it's becoming a melting pot, but it warms my heart to hear you say, because I didn't know that Murrow didn't like radio. I mean, that he didn't want to leave radio for TV.
Right.
And it's like, oh, this is where we are.
Right.
This is where we are right now in this moment. And people are straddling. Like, I have friends who are like, oh, but I want to be on a TV show. I'm like, no one's watching TV. Everyone's watching your phone. Unless you're watching a live event in the world of sports. That's how you get people to pay attention.
Or I will say also, when COVID first happened, we had record numbers, the viewership, because, and it's interesting, when I went to get my master's degree only to get my internship, one of my professors said, people tune into news to know, is my world safe?
That's it.
And in that moment, that may have been the first time in my lifetime when there was a question, is my world safe?
That is so true. Well, 9/11, were you?
9/11, but I do think that was a pocket of the country, right? That was primarily in Pennsylvania and New York City and Washington, D.C.
Yeah, you're right.
And people may have felt fear, concern for a day or two, like, oh, could it happen here? But for the most part, it was a day in a concentrated part of the country.
Yep.
And people in Kansas and California and Texas didn't have to worry. Where with COVID, the whole world was like, well, how long do we have to live potentially, for those first few months, I would say at least.
I 100% agree. You're absolutely right. Now that you think of that, it was the entire world. We were all globally in this together.
Yes.
We all were shut down. We did not know, and you're right, record numbers. What does it look like? What does it feel like?
Yes.
How will it affect my family? Like, I think COVID did this for a lot of people. It removed the veil of what we thought was in our country. And there were things that we learned that just weren't true. Things that we had been taught since we were in elementary school and on a very primary level. And oftentimes, and this we're talking about this nuance and where we are today, oftentimes when you try to say, well, no, here is a fact that I do know is a fact, it feels as if someone says, like, you're just being pro-Black and you're not, and you're anti-American. And you're like, no, this is a fact.
Yes, right.
This is back to just presenting the facts. This is a fact. This did not happen. According to what our history book says, that's just not accurate.
Right.
And so now what I am hearing, everyone does have an opinion, but it makes it so, like, to the nuance of it all, it makes it so incredibly tough to remain neutral and try to share just the facts. So I think you saying that to me, or just someone who's listening, I have tons of mentees who listen, it's just wise. Let's keep the main thing, if you will.
And I think what I'm able to bring, and I'm reminded of, I love this quote from Shirley Chisholm, who said, if they don't give you a seat at the table, bring a folding chair, right? And I think that being able to have that seat at the table allows us to have conversations that people hadn't thought about. So it's not my opinion, but I'm able to expose a new way of looking at something, right? And so, for example, during COVID and during the, uprising during George Floyd aftermath, I said, why don't we have a conversation with, at the time, we had all these Black women who were heading up major cities. So at the time, it was like Keisha Lance Bottoms in Atlanta. You had Washington, D.C. You had San Francisco, Chicago. We didn't have, but she was, I think she was after, I think she was before COVID.
Oh, she was.
I think she was before COVID.
Okay.
But we got them together. Everybody was virtual. So it was like, all right, let's just do this virtual roundtable and do this panel.
Yeah.
And it was interesting because the executive producer I was with at the time said, this was a great idea and we wouldn't have thought of it had we likely not had a Black woman being able to bring this suggestion.
There you go.
And so it's not like I'm giving my opinion.
Yeah, but
I'm just bringing in a new perspective.
With my folding chair.
With my folding chair.
Amen to that. I received that. So also, you mentioned your books, and that's where you kind of bring in your faith. I didn't know, today years old, as the kids say, that you wrote 6 books. Where do you find the time? Where do you find the time between all of the jobs, the full life, running by the way, guys, excuse me, folks, half marathons. You've done 44 states.
So my husband and I are trying to run all 50 states, a half marathon in each state. And so, yes, we just finished our 44th, 6 more to go. And those last 6 could not come soon enough. Yes. But where do I find this time? I believe that whatever you're passionate about, you will make room for.
Yeah.
And so there were a number of things that got me started with the idea of being interested in writing a children's book. But part of it was not seeing representation like I wanted to for my son as I was raising an African-American son and feeling like I had to be so deliberate. It was kind of like, aside from February where you'd have, the 12 books on the center table for Black History Month, typically I just wasn't finding books regularly that I wanted, not just with the characters, but with the message, with the inspiration that I wanted for my son. So I was like, okay, well, rather than complain about it, I actually consider myself to be a storyteller by day.
Yeah.
So why not try and expand in this way? And then another aspect was, I feel like the news is so heavy. What I do, especially when my son was a little younger, he's 10 now, but a little younger, I would tell my husband, like, don't even let him watch the news, and he wanted to see mommy on TV because I was gone. And so it was like this way that he could connect. but I felt like it was inappropriate. It was just too heavy, especially during, again, the George Floyd aftermath and the protests and just so much angst. And I felt like as a young Black male, he didn't need to have that albatross around his neck. I mean, because he was already asking, like in the wake of the, Philadelphia Starbucks incident when you had the two Black men who were arrested trying to use the bathroom without buying anything. And he had said, and he was maybe 4 or 5, and he was like, are the police going to take Daddy and me to jail if we go to Starbucks? He was identifying, as a Black male. And I was like, this is heavy. And I wanted to do something where I could share Mommy's work, just here you go. This is what I'm doing. And I don't have to be concerned that it's causing him harm in some way or stress.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I do think that, first of all, writing children's books, it's really kind of easy.
I was going to say, because you piled
really
out
easy.
6. This latest one is a New York Times bestseller.
The last 2, yes.
The last 2.
Yes, yeah.
Congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
Congratulations. That's really such a beautiful accomplishment.
I appreciate that.
And I know that when you're like an achiever and you do a lot of things, it's just one more thing I'm doing. But I hope you can sit in that. That's just a beautiful, beautiful achievement.
It's one thing that I want to do more is sitting in it in the moment, right? Because I am always like, okay, on to the next. Now what are we doing? And what's and then like when you don't actually savor it, I think that is a lost opportunity. And I'm unfortunate because you just don't appreciate, what has been accomplished. But I do feel blessed that people are reading the books. And, there was an essay that I read years ago when I was first thinking about writing children's books. It was called Mirrors, Windows, and Sliding Glass Doors. And it was talking about how the importance of children's books, first of all, if children don't see themselves in the pages, reflected in the pages, they won't look to books anymore. And that's a problem, right? Because we want children to read. But the idea was mirrors, because they need to see themselves reflected, windows, so they can peer into a world that's unfamiliar to their own, and the sliding glass door, if that window is to really be transformative, it can serve as that sliding glass door to kind of bring them into this different world. And I think that is, going back to our other conversation about, having those difficult talks about where we are different. I think that the same thing applies not just to religion or land or, but race, obviously.
Yeah.
And, many of the characters in my books initially were Black and brown. And I think that people thought, oh, they're Black and brown characters, they're for Black and brown children. And I really don't think that is the truth. I think that quite often we fear what we don't know. And so immediately we have boxes and divisions.
Yeah.
But if you can be exposed, and I think that quite often that may not be in your neighborhood, your church, your school, maybe it's not very diverse, but you can give a child a doll that's different, right? You can put a book in their hand that's different. And so that is what I'm hoping to be able to do is, be a bridge. And through the children's books that I'm doing, bring everybody into the tent. In this latest book, Girls of the World, like we're very intentional about making sure that different religions are represented.
Oh, really?
That kids with, 2 of the girls are in wheelchairs, one has a prosthetic leg. It's like, when we talk about diversity, let's not just talk about black
Skin
and white.
Color.
Right.
Yeah. I think that's really important. Do you notice, since you talk, okay, speaking of your book and making sure you're everyone is diverse, characters are diverse, but we're not talking just skin color.
Yes.
Different needs, different accessibilities. When I watch programming like that, like a movie or maybe a series or a sitcom, I can't even think of one right now. But when it pops up and it doesn't slap you in the face and it feels just it's natural and this is the world, it makes you understand more. It was a show I watched. One of the kids had autism. The other, was a racially diverse family, interracial marriage, all the things that were, and it wasn't forced. It felt very effortless. And to me, that is true diversity and it sounds like what you're trying to accomplish in your storytelling for children, because that's where you're planting the seeds.
And planting the seed is an expression that I use quite often with the books in a number of ways, in tolerance or acceptance, in loving, and the funny thing is, Cari, that I think that kids already know.
Yep.
It's the adults who,
Forget.
right. You know, people always say like, you know, oh, kids are colorblind. I totally disagree with that. Kids see color. They just don't attach a value to it. It's the adults who do that.
Powerful.
And so quite often I'm like, these messages that I'm putting out there, hopefully the parents who are reading the books to the kids are kind of picking something up, because the kids already know. Like I always think about like my son when he was younger and going off to camp for the day, you know, meeting new people. He would never come home and say like, tell me about somebody's race or gender or religion. He would just say, oh my gosh, my new friend, mommy.
Yeah.
He loves Starbucks. He loves Star Wars just like I do. He loves Legos just like I do. Kids find the commonality and they go with it. Adults are more like, oh, but you're different and we don't associate and you believe and, you know, and that is what I think is so unfortunate. We just have to think like children. We have to get back to that kind of way of viewing the world.
And when he comes home and he tells you about someone he met, he's not telling you what color they are.
No, never.
It's always just, here are the qualities.
Right.
And wow, that's so powerful. That's a thought that we just don't do. We immediately assign value and we put it in a box. And I see what you mean. And that means this if you come from here.
Yes, exactly.
If you dress like that and you talk like that and you move like that. You've already decided who you are before we've even given you an opportunity. That's unfortunate. I'm really glad that you are here and you are a source of inspiration for me. And definitely I approve of enlightenment for our children in society because we need that so much. I wonder in your downtime, outside of running marathons all over the United States of America, her downtime, 6 or 7 books in?
6 books.
6 books in, lots of work. I mean, what do you do to just say, nope, I'm doing nothing. This is my funny moment. Do you eat ramen and watch old Sex and the City shows? What do you do where you just completely veg out and it doesn't require to do?
So one thing, I have a really bad sweet tooth.
Oh, good.
And that's part of the reason why I run. I justify, like I can eat this and so therefore I can do this. But my ideal day, I'm in a robe all day. I watch movies with my son.
Yeah.
I might be taking a nap during part of that time. We're eating some like really good takeout food at home. And I don't leave the house all day. And I look a mess. I have no makeup done, no hair done. And I'm just in my happy place.
No, you're not on. You're not talking. You're not aware. Shoulders are right where they belong, not on your ears.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Just enjoying yourself. That sounds like a lovely time. Is there anything that you're watching that I should binge or any past television shows? Because I'm in the process now. I'm catching. I didn't watch TV for. I can't even imagine. I watched news. I watched sports. I watched live events.
You've got to watch sports all the time.
There was no enjoying television. So I just finished Game of Thrones, and I'm trying to have this conversation with people. They're like, "You're about 10 years too late." I'm like, "Wait, but Jon Snow." They're like, "No, thank you." And now I'm watching Homeland. So is there anything that you've watched in the past or present that you're like, this has been my go-to show that provides a bit of an escape?
You know, and I'm going to be the same way like that you are in that I'm late because I watched a series, maybe it was like 7 actually episodes with Idris Elba, The Hostage.
Oh.
Did you watch that?
You know
it was a while ago, right?
Yes.
But I just finally was able to kind of watch that.
I love that. What was it called?
Was it called Hostage?
Jacqueeze, what was that called? I'm asking my producer cut. What was that Idris Elba show called on Apple? It was a show on Apple TV. You guys, I don't remember. I know, I love that show.
I want to say it was called Hostage, but I totally might be wrong.
No, but I loved it.
But I loved Hijack.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, I knew it started with an H.
Hijack.
Yes, Hijack. Yes. I love frivolous suspense thriller, things that will take me away. And it tends to be more that I read like novels that are like, you know, than binge a show. But that was one that I really, you know.
That was good.
I rarely have the time to be able to be like, next episode. That one, I was like, okay, I got to watch another one.
I have it. I have time now. No, that was great. Sabrina, I know his wife, Sabrina. Sabrina, we love, she calls him our husband. We love our husband.
Yes. Yes.
So, we love our husband.
Thank you for sharing him.
Thanks for sharing it with the world. Linsey Davis, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. I know you have lots to get to. I just want you to understand that I do this and I take extra special care of those who I see that live in the world that I do, but I've also admired along the way. Although we're peers, I still have so much admiration because I know what it takes to stay and sustain and to prosper and do your job and try to have a life. And so it's just always an honor to meet you doing it. And with so much grace. You were way like professional, guys. She got here like an hour before I did. And I'm coming in on the phone eating chips. I'm kidding. But I was like, oh my God, look, I love it.
I want to just, if I can, gush for a minute with some mutual admiration, because I always think people say like, oh, who are you most nervous to interview? When I do feel a little concerned is when I'm interviewing someone who is an interviewer.
Me too.
And you are fantastic.
Oh, thank you.
So it's interesting, like when people say, "Oh, you were great," or whatever. You know, this felt like so comfortable. But now I know what people are looking at because that is what you gave me, was just that comfortability and that space, and you clearly did your homework, and so it was just like an honor to be able to sit across from you.
It's
so thank
mutual
you.
admiration. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. Linsey Davis, go out and buy the book. She has 6 of them, y'all. 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'll list them all for you. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.